Most people believe the biggest financial danger in their life is the stock market crashing. Some people believe it's inflation slowly destroying their savings. Others believe it's the government or the economy collapsing overnight. But strangely enough, the biggest financial danger most people face is something much quieter, something that almost never appears in headlines, and something millions of people repeat year after year without realizing how expensive it actually is. Because when people feel confused about money, they become predictable. And when people become predictable, systems can quietly profit from their behavior. The truth is, the financial world often looks complicated on the surface, but underneath that complexity are very simple patterns that repeat over and over again. Once you understand those patterns, a lot of financial fear suddenly disappears. And when fear disappears, people start making much better decisions with their money. Part 2. Why bank failures terrify people. Let's start with something that scares millions of Americans every time it appears in the news: bank failures. Whenever a bank collapse shows up on television or social media, panic spreads almost instantly. People imagine empty bank accounts, they imagine frozen savings, they imagine retirement funds disappearing overnight. It feels like the financial system itself is breaking. But here's the question most people never stop to ask: what actually happens when a bank fails? Because the answer is far less dramatic than most people expect. In the United States, deposits in banks are protected by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. The rule is simple. If a bank fails, deposits up to $250,000 per depositor per bank are insured by the government. And historically, bank failures follow a surprisingly boring pattern. Regulators step in, usually on a Friday afternoon after markets close. The bank is shut down temporarily, another financial institution takes control of the assets, and by the next business day, depositors usually regain access to their money. In fact, since the FDIC was created in 1933, not a single depositor has lost insured funds. That protection survived the Great Depression, it survived 2 world wars, and it survived the 2008 financial crisis. Part 3. The Silicon Valley Bank Panic. A recent example shows how this system actually works. In March of 2023, Silicon Valley Bank collapsed after depositors tried to withdraw $42 billion in a single day. It became the fastest bank run in American history. Naturally, panic spread quickly. Headlines appeared everywhere warning about a potential financial crisis. But there was an unusual complication. Nearly 89% of the bank's deposits were above the insured limit. Technically, that money was not guaranteed. Under normal rules, those depositors could have lost huge amounts of money, but regulators made a decision designed to prevent a larger crisis. They stepped in and guaranteed every deposit anyway. Why? Because the entire financial system runs on one fragile ingredient: trust. If people suddenly believe their money isn't safe in banks, panic spreads extremely fast, and panic can damage healthy banks just as easily as weak ones. So regulators acted quickly to stop the fear before it spread further. The result? No depositor lost their money. Part 4. The truth about bank failures. Here's the surprising truth most people rarely hear. Bank failures are actually very rare events. During the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, about 157 banks failed in a single year. At the time, that number was considered catastrophic, but the United States has thousands of banks operating across the country, which means even during one of the worst financial crises in modern history, the majority of banks continued operating normally. In recent years, the system has remained even more stable. By 2025, the US banking system was largely functioning without major disruptions. For the average person, the only meaningful risk is very simple: keeping more than $250,000 at a single institution. And if that ever becomes your situation, the solution is simple: spread your money across multiple banks. That small step removes almost all risk. Part 5. Why recessions scare everyone. But bank failures aren't what scare investors the most. The word that truly triggers financial fear is something else: recession. Every few years, someone claims the economy is about to collapse. Charts begin circulating online. Experts start predicting disasters. Social media fills with warnings about economic doom. Gold sales spike. People begin preparing for the worst. And suddenly, it feels like the entire financial system is about to fall apart. But history tells a very different story. The United States has experienced 34 recessions since 1854. That sounds frightening until you look at what happened afterward. Because after every recession in modern American history, the economy eventually recovered, and then moved higher every single time. Part 6. The reality of economic cycles. Since World War II, the average recession in the United States has lasted about 10 months, but the average economic expansion that follows has lasted nearly 4 years. That means periods of growth are typically far longer than periods of contraction. Recessions feel permanent when people are living through them, but historically they have always been temporary. Think of them like winter: cold, uncomfortable, sometimes painful, but never permanent, and eventually replaced by spring. Part 7. The Market Timing Trap. Here's something even more fascinating. By the time economists officially declare a recession, the stock market has already started recovering. That's because markets react to expectations about the future, not current headlines. Investors constantly try to predict what will happen months or years ahead. So by the time bad news becomes obvious to everyone, markets may already be adjusting for recovery, which leads to one of the most expensive mistakes people make: selling when fear feels strongest. Part 8. The 10 Best Days Problem. Research from JPMorgan Chase studied market performance over long periods. They discovered something surprising. If an investor remained invested for 20 years, they captured the full market return. But if they missed just the 10 best trading days during that time, their total return could be cut roughly in half. And those best days rarely appear during calm market periods. They tend to occur during moments of extreme uncertainty, right after crashes, right when people feel the most panic, which means selling during fear can be incredibly expensive. Part 9. The Psychology Behind Bad Decisions. Psychologists call this phenomenon loss aversion. Humans feel financial losses roughly twice as strongly as gains. This idea was explored by Nobel Prize-winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman. Our brains evolved to avoid danger, so when markets fall, our instincts tell us to escape immediately. But historically, that instinct has cost investors enormous amounts of money, because after every recession in modern American history, the market eventually recovered and then moved higher every single time. Part 10. The Ordinary Investor Story. Now imagine someone named Alex. Alex is 26 years old. Alex earns $63,000 a year. Alex recently enrolled in a 401k retirement plan. They started investing $150 per month. Last month, they paid down $400 of credit card debt, and for the first time in their life, they checked their credit score. None of this sounds extraordinary. There's no hedge fund strategy involved, no complicated trading system, just small financial decisions repeated consistently. But over decades, those small decisions can quietly build enormous wealth. Part 11. The Hidden Secret of Finance. The financial system feels confusing for many people, not because it has to be, because complexity creates dependency, and dependency creates customers. The more intimidating money feels, the easier it becomes to sell products designed to simplify it. Expensive funds, unnecessary financial services, investment products people barely understand. For many companies, confusion isn't a problem, it's part of the business model. The truth is surprisingly simple. Build an emergency fund, avoid high-interest debt, invest consistently, and refuse to panic when fear dominates the headlines. Those habits may seem boring, they won't go viral on social media, but over decades, they quietly build financial security because money compounds month after month, year after year. Part 14. Final message. Imagine saving or investing just $948 per year. It doesn't sound life-changing, but multiply that amount across 40 years of adult life, add compound growth, and suddenly that small number becomes something enormous. Not because of genius investing, but because of consistency. No hedge fund required, no trust fund required, just understanding the basics well enough to avoid expensive mistakes. Because once you understand how the financial system actually works, fear loses its power. And when fear disappears, smarter financial decisions finally become possible. If you found this video helpful, consider subscribing, because most people spend decades learning financial lessons the hard way, and sometimes one simple piece of knowledge can quietly change an entire financial future.